Look, I don't know why people have a weird fetish of turning regular weirdos into prophets. I mean, you can look at the guy who thought he was Jesus' little brother, or the self-help guru who branded people in the name of empowerment. Cults have managed to blend ego, religion, and bad decisions into full-blown disasters. They've started wars, built utopias, and convinced thousands to hand over their money, families, and most times their lives. All because someone with perfect confidence and zero sanity said, "Trust me, baby, I can buy you a ticket into heaven." Okay. Yeah, that sounds pretty good to me. And so today we're going to be talking about the weirdest cults in history. And just make sure you buckle up because this one's about to get fucked. So it's the 1950s in Indianapolis, and a charismatic preacher by the name of Jim Jones decides he's going to fix racism, poverty, and inequality all at once. Which sounds pretty noble, right? But oh no, just you wait. He goes on to found the People's Temple in 1955, and his sermons mix everything that you would want: civil rights activism, faith healing, and enough emotional manipulation to make a TED Talk host blush. And then by the mid-1960s, he's got an integrated congregation, political influence, and a growing belief that he alone can save the world. Then he moves the whole operation to California because I guess that's where all good cults go to level up. And in the 1970s in San Francisco, Jones looks essentially unstoppable. He's running social programs, feeding the poor, and playing politics so well that he's actually appointed the chairman of the San Francisco Housing Authority in 1975. But behind the scenes, like any good cult, it's all running on paranoia and control. Members go on to sign over paychecks and property, and sleep deprivation and loyalty tests become essentially routine, right? No red flags yet. And then Jones starts replacing God with himself and calling his movement apostolic socialism. And then the media starts sniffing around his finances and healings. Jones goes full, fine, you know what, I'll build my own utopia away from you guys. And then in 1977, he relocates hundreds of followers to a jungle clearing in Guyana, which I think is how you say it, where he builds Jonestown, a so-called agriculture commune that looks more like a prison with palm trees. The pitch that he tells people, paradise on earth. But in reality, it's really just 12-hour workdays, rice rations, armed guards, and Jones blasting his voice through speakers all night long. He constantly calls white nights, where he makes everyone rehearse for an apocalypse that only he can see coming. And by late 1978, somehow there's over 1,000 people living in Jonestown. Family members back home start panicking, obviously, because they're wondering, where's my family and what are they doing? And so Congressman Leo Ryan flies down with journalists to check things out. Now, at first, Jonestown puts on a Broadway-level performance, smiles, perfect songs, perfect tours, everybody looks happy, right? It's a utopia. But during the visit, several residents slip notes and tell the reporters that obviously this is not a utopia, it's a cult. A ton of them are asking them to leave with them and escape, and Ryan agrees to take them home because this isn't a prison, it's a utopia where everyone's free to leave when they want. Right? But as they're boarding the planes at the small jungle airstrip, Jones' armed guards, his so-called Red Brigade, rolls up on tractor and opens fire on all these people. Congressman Ryan, 3 journalists, and 1 defector is killed. Obviously, this needs to be addressed, so back in Jonestown, Jones gathers everyone under the pavilion, and coincidentally, he tells them that the world is now going to end and that he saw it. The US is going to invade, and the revolutionary suicide is the only choice left for them. Buckets of grape flavor aid laced with cyanide and sedatives magically appear out of nowhere. Parents are told to dose their children first, and guards stand by for anyone who's ready to resist. And within hours, over 900 people are dead, unfortunately including over 304 children. Jones dies from a gunshot wound, which was likely self-inflicted. And when the Guyanese authorities arrive, it's a nightmare beyond comprehension. This event becomes the largest single loss of American civilian life until 9/11. And here's the brutal truth of the whole thing. Most victims didn't even drink the Kool-Aid or the flavor aid. They were coerced, injected, and essentially trapped. I mean, there was no way of getting out of this alive. The People's Temple began as a movement for justice and ended up being a cautionary tale about unchecked power, blind faith, and what happens when one man's paranoia becomes everybody else's apocalypse. Alright, so it's 1997 in California, and 39 people are lying in bunk beds wearing matching black clothes, brand new Nike decades, and purple shrouds over the head. Why? You're gonna love this. Because they think a UFO hiding behind a comet is about to beam them up to a higher dimension. No, that's not satire, that's Heaven's Gate. Now, it all started in the early 1970s with Marshall Applewhite, a Texas music teacher with a God complex and a nervous breakdown, and Bonnie Nettles, a nurse deep into mysticism. They had the bright idea where they decided that they were the 2 witnesses from the Book of Revelation, renamed themselves Bo and Peep, and then later Doe and T, and started preaching that the earth was basically an alien daycare, a place for souls to evolve into the next level. Humans were just vehicles, the body was just a shell, and the goal was to ditch it and join the aliens upstairs. And then in 1975, they held a meeting at Waldorf, Oregon, telling people that the UFO would pick them up pretty soon. A bunch About 20 folks vanished with them, enough that Walter Cronkite covered it on national TV. From there, the group went underground, moving around in vans, living communally, and perfecting their "we're serious about this" vibe. No sex, no drugs, no possessions, no names. I mean, talk about a boring cult, am I right? Okay, sorry, back to the story. And even back in the day, they rebranded a few times like some cursed startup. First, it was the Human Individual Metamorphosis, and then the Total Overcomers Anonymous, before finally setting on Heaven's Gate, which, I mean, was probably the best name out of all those three. And then by the 90s, they'd gone full aesthetic, monk meets tech go. And then they ran a web design company called Higher Source, making early websites while preaching UFO salvation on Onsenet. And then came their big sign from above, Hail Bob. Astronomers discovered it in 1995. Conspiracy nuts claimed a UFO was trailing it. And for Applewhite, that was the bus that he was waiting for. And in March 1997, at their rented Rancho Santa Fe mansion, they decided to exit their vehicles. Over 3 days, all 39 members took phenobarbital-laced applesauce, chased it with vodka, and then tied plastic bags over their heads. They slowly died in waves, each group carefully arranging the previous one's identical clothes, shoes, and the purple shrouds. And I think the best part is that each body had $5.75 in their pocket because I guess they needed to be prepared just in case the aliens requested a bus fare. And their leader, Applewhite, like every good cult leader, went last. And then the details get a little bit weirder the deeper you go. 8 men, including Applewhite, voluntarily castrated themselves to overcome human desire. They also bought alien abduction insurance, which I didn't even know existed until doing research for this video, for $1 million per person. Their website still exists, the same 1990s design, same cosmic manifesto run by 2 surviving members. And what made Heaven's Gate so eerie wasn't that it was just a mass suicide, it was calm and organized devotion. These weren't uneducated fanatics. These were coders, ex-nurses, and even a brother of Star Trek's Nichelle Nichols. All right, picture this. Texas, early 90s. A wannabe rock star turned prophet named David Koresh, born Vernon Howell, turns a tiny apocalyptic Bible study into a doomsday fortress called Mount Carmel, right outside of Waco. He's preaching that he and he alone can unlock the 7 seals from Revelation, which is cult leader for "I'm the chosen one, hand over your wallet, your wife, and probably your gun." The Branch Davidians were already a splinter of a splinter, an offshoot of an offshoot, the Seventh-day Adventists. Their original leaders were the Rodin family, but when the matriarch, Louise Rodin, died, her son George Rodin fought Koresh for control in 1987. Now, the fight actually ended with an actual gun battle in a cemetery over who was God's chosen messenger. Koresh won, obviously, both legally and spiritually, because nothing screams holy man like a shootout over a corpse. Then by the early 90s, Koresh had hundreds of followers, dozens of guns, and a theology that basically boiled down to the apocalypse starts with us. He called himself the Lamb of God, took spiritual wives, which some were underage, and stockpiled weapons like the end of times were on sale at Walmart. Now, the ATF caught wind of this and decided to raid the place on February 28th, 1993, after months of investigating illegal firearm transactions. Oh, but plot twist, the cult knew that they were coming because a mailman who was also a member of the Branch Davidians tipped them off. So 76 heavily armed agents roll up to the compound, and within minutes, the whole thing goes Call of Duty Revelation Edition. Unfortunately, 4 ATF agents die, over a dozen are injured, and Koresh takes a bullet and keeps preaching mid-siege because that's what any good cult leader would do. And after a tense 2-hour firefight, both sides call a ceasefire, and then the FBI takes over. And thus begins the 51-day Mexican standoff, with more negotiators, tanks, and bad communication than a family reunion at Thanksgiving. Koresh promised to surrender just as soon as he finished writing his explanation of the 7 seals. Days turned into weeks, and the FBI blasted loud music and sleep deprivation tactics. Koresh responded with Bible sermons and shortwave radios. Some followers, including 21 children, were released, but around 120 people stayed inside, convinced that this was their Armageddon dress rehearsal. And then finally, on April 19, 1993, the FBI lost patience. Attorney General Janet Reno greenlit the assault using CS tear gas to push them out. Armored vehicles punched holes into the walls, gas poured in, and then a fire erupted. 3 separate blazes started almost simultaneously. Winds fanned the flames in, and within minutes, the wooden compound turned into a fiery inferno. And to make matters even worse, there were inside mothers, children, and Koresh himself, who died from another gunshot wound, kind of like our guy Jones over here. And when the smoke cleared, 76 Branch Davidians were dead, including, unfortunately, 25 children. The cause of this fire is still debated today. It's either the FBI tear gas or a cult suicide pact, but I don't know. I mean, you could be the judge of that. Now, officially on paper, investigators said that the Davidians lit it themselves, but either way, the ending looked exactly like Koresh said it would. Flames, death, and divine judgment. except everything was also broadcasted on CNN. The Waco siege became a defining American tragedy, part cult catastrophe and part government disaster. Survivors were prosecuted, the site was bulldozed, and Waco's names became shorthand for federal overreach. It radicalized an entire generation of anti-government extremists, most infamously Timothy McVeigh, who visited the site before bombing Oklahoma City. So yeah, the Branch Davidians, a doomsday cult led by a self-declared messiah, a bundled federal raid, and a 51-day standoff that turned the Bible study into a live-action apocalypse. Oh boy. The Manson family, the acid-fueled crash course in what happens when the 60s peace and love era gets a firmware update straight from hell. This is the story of a wannabe rock star named Charles Manson who failed at music, failed at crime, and then somehow succeeded at founding one of the most infamous cults in American history, all from a broken down ranch in the California desert. Now, to understand this, we first have to rewind. Manson was born in 1934 to a teenage mother who allegedly sold him for a pitcher of beer, which, I mean, obviously that sets the tone for everything. He spent most of his youth ping-ponging between reform schools and prison, and by the time he got out in 1967, the summer of love was in full swing. Then he arrives in San Francisco like a cockroach who just discovered LSD, armed with a guitar, some half-baked mysticism, and a talent for manipulating lost people. And oh, in the 60s, there were plenty. Drifters, addicts, rich kids with trust funds, women looking for belonging. By late 1968, he'd built what he called the Family, a group of about 30 devoted followers who lived communally and dropped acid like it was in their diet plan, and worshipped him as a kind of messiah slash guru slash weird uncle who just never left. Then they moved to Spahn Ranch, an old movie set outside of Los Angeles owned by an elderly blind guy named George Spahn. I mean, picture the scene from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Manson traded the girl's company for rent, which I'll let you figure out what that means. While the world jammed to the Beatles, Manson convinced his followers that the White Album contained a hidden prophecy, an upcoming race war called Helter Skelter. Now, according to Charlie's Craft Gospel, the black population would rise up, wipe out the white establishment, and then, wait for it, he and his followers would emerge from hiding and rule the survivors as enlightened rulers. Because when you need your apocalypse explained, you obviously go to an unemployed ex-con with an LSD problem. Now, Manson wanted to kickstart this prophecy, so in August 1969, he sent followers, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwickel, and Linda Casbion, I think that's how you say her name, to a house in Beverly Hills. He said, do something fucked up. Oh, and they definitely followed orders here. Because what followed was the Tate murders. They brutally killed Sharon Tate, a rising actress and a wife of director Roman Polanski, along with 4 others. Tate was 8 months pregnant during this time, and they wrote pig in blood on the door for the cops to find. And they're not done there, because the next night they murdered supermarket executive Leo LiBianca and his wife, leaving more bloody messages like death to pigs and helter skelter. LA obviously went feral with fear. Manson thought it would spark his race war, but instead it just sparked a nationwide manhunt. And then by December 1969, the family was arrested and the trial was a complete circus. Manson carved an X into his forehead, his followers copied him, and they sang in court, and Susan Atkins bragged about the killings like she just won a Grammy or something. Now, I already know what you're saying. No, it wasn't a swastika. Well, not during the 1970s trial. It was an X. Then he later put it into a swastika. Then in 1971, Manson and his co-defendants were convicted of first-degree murder, death sentences all around, later commuted to life when California temporarily banned executions. Unfortunately. Manson then died in 2017, still convinced that he was some cosmic prophet. Most of his followers either died in prison or turned into walking cautionary tales. So yeah, Charles Manson, a failed musician who weaponized hippie idealism, convinced that the Beatles told him to start a race war, and ended up writing his name in blood across history. All right, this next cult is kind of like if you combine Silicon Valley meets Scientology with a dash of sex trafficking. This is the story of NXIVM. I know it doesn't look like that, but that's how it's pronounced. It's what happens when a self-help seminar metastasizes into a pyramid scheme of manipulation, branding, and blackmail, all led by a guy who looks like the IT tech you would avoid at a company picnic. Then enter Keith Raniere, the genius behind it all. This dude had a resume that read like ChatGPT on a bender. He allegedly had an IQ of 240. He was a concert pianist, judo champion, philosopher, mathematician. I mean, you name it, and he claimed it. In reality, though, he was just a washed-up Amway salesman who realized manipulating people paid a little bit better than motivating them. And so with that knowledge, in 1998, he founded NXIVM, marketed as an executive success program. Basically, it was just an expensive self-help boot camp promising personal growth, emotional breakthroughs, the ethical development. I mean, you name it, it was all over. Which translation, it was just pay thousands of dollars to have strangers humiliate you in a beige hotel ballroom. But Raniere wasn't acting alone. No, his right-hand woman was Nancy Salzman, a legitimate therapist who co-founded the group and became his enabler. Together, they built a slick self-help empire based in Albany, New York. Members took courses on controlling emotions, building confidence, and reprogramming limiting beliefs. I mean, tell me if you've heard that one before. And I mean, these classes even attracted big names, billionaire heiresses Claire and Sarah Bronfman, yes, the Seagram liquor money, and actresses like Allison Mack from Smallville. The mix of wealth, fame, and pseudoscience made NXIVM look like it was the real deal. But behind the PowerPoints and pastel sweaters, Rainier was quietly running a sex cult. That's because inside NXIVM was a secret inner circle called DOS, which is Latin shorthand for Dominus Obiscuous Scorium. I don't really know how to say it, but the translation is master over slave women. Yes, he actually named it that, and recruits were told that it's a women's empowerment sorority. In reality, they were just required to hand over collateral, which is basically just nudes, confession, financial secrets, to prove their loyalty, and then masters ordered them to perform sexual acts on Rainier. Oh, and I forgot to mention, they were branded near the pelvis with a cauterizing pen. The design secretly contained Rainier's initials. It's like girl boss energy, but make it medieval torture. I mean, you got to do something to make your cult stand out. And by the mid-2010s, cracks started forming and former members fled and started speaking out. Then in 2017, the New York Times published a bombshell expose showing photos of the brands detailing the slaves and masters hierarchy. The FBI got involved and Rainier fled to Mexico like a Walmart brand Bond villain, hiding out in a luxury villa until agents literally raided him mid-yoga session in 2018. And the trial was a pure spectacle. I mean, witnesses described everything: forced starvation diets, sleep deprivation, blackmail, Rainier's obsession with collecting collateral. And in 2019, he was convicted on charges including sex trafficking, racketeering, and forced labor. Rainier went on to get 120 years in prison, which is a little light if you ask me. Thankfully, NXIVM officially imploded, leaving behind a trail of ruined lives, branded flesh, and one of the most bizarre cautionary tales of the self-help era. Now, if that's not proof that if someone charges you $5,000 to unlock your potential, you're probably just joining a cult.